notice that all staff members will be wearing masks at all times. As a guest, you must wear a face mask while waiting to be seated and at all other times when not at your table. Physical distancing of at least 6 feet, 2 meters, must be maintained during any waiting or queuing, and you must use the hand sanitizers provided before entering the establishment. You will be greeted at the door by a dedicated staff member and only granted access if safe to do so while adhering to physical distancing. In particular, you will not be allowed to enter when others are leaving in order to avoid close contact. Businesses are recommended to monitor the health of staff and diners. Therefore, your temperature may be taken and recorded. Managers will also have the right to remove guests who show signs of COVID-19, like coughing or sweating. Dining establishments have systems in place to ensure adequate physical distancing within restrooms. This may, in many instances, allow for only one person to use the restroom at any given time. Contact tracing is an essential part of combating any outbreak of communicable disease. Therefore, the contact details of one primary diner will be recorded and include the date and time of visit, full name, address, phone number, and email address. Further details on these indoor dining directions can be found on the government website, coronavirus.gov.bm.
Good afternoon, Bermuda. I hope that everyone is doing well and enjoying the blissful Bermuda summer. This afternoon, I'm joined by the Minister of Health and the Minister of Public Works. The Minister of National Security sends her apologies as she is at her ministry getting briefed for the House of Assembly tomorrow as she's going right into work to answer parliamentary questions. So I will be taking questions on behalf of the Ministry of National Security if there are any today. As a country, for the most part, we have followed the rules, behaved appropriately, and contributed to our success in battling this pandemic. We could not have made it this far without unity, hard work, and dedication. It has not been easy, from sheltering in place to curbside shopping, grocery days by last name, curfews, social distancing, face coverings, and economic hardship. It has taken a tremendous toll on all of us. But as I've said before, collectively as a country, Bermuda rose to the occasion, and we have shown ourselves to be an example to the world of how to manage and live with this virus. While most of us have done well by following the guidelines, we all have to remember that it only takes one undetected case of this highly contagious virus to set us back. So while we have earned the changes that will be announced today, we must continue to remain ever vigilant. First Minister to speak will be Minister Wilson, who will give an update from the Ministry of Health regarding the latest test results and other matters related to health requirements. Minister of Health.
Good afternoon. Today, there were 363 test results received by the Ministry of Health, and 2 were positive for COVID-19. Both new cases were imported on the Delta flight of the 15th of July by returning residents. It saddens me terribly to have to tell you that, unfortunately, one of those persons involved did not adhere to the required quarantine period and attended their workplace before actually waiting to receive their arrival test, which turned out to be positive. Consequently, the case management team is busy now contact tracing all of the persons that this individual was in contact with on the island, in addition to the nearby passengers on the flights. The advice for the other passengers that were on that Delta flight 656 that arrived yesterday, the 15th of July, is to proceed with extreme caution. Follow the quarantine instructions that you were given upon arrival. Monitor your symptoms. wear a face mask at all times, and keep 6 feet away from others. If you were sitting near one of the positive cases, a public health officer will be in touch with you soon to give you follow-up instructions. And I can also report that pursuant to clause 12 of the quarantine COVID-19 number 3 order 2020, as read with clause 11(1) of the Quarantine Act 2017, the matter has been reported to the police for them to commence an investigation. Bermuda now has 152 total confirmed positive cases, and their status is as follows. There are 6 active cases who are all under active public health monitoring. None are in hospital or in critical care. A total of 137 have recovered, and the total deceased remains at 9. The average age of all of our confirmed positive cases is 60, and the age range of all of our positive cases is between 18 and 101 years. Overall, 55% of our cases are Black, 41% are white, and 4% are other or unknown. The source of all our local cases is as follows. 48 are imported, 85 are local transmission with known contact, 18 are local transmission with an unknown contact, and 1 is currently under investigation. Bermuda's country status still remains at sporadic cases, and the 7-day average of our real-time reproduction number is below 1. I now have a few updates to provide to you as it relates to the arriving travelers. As the volume of travelers increases, our testing teams and capability is becoming increasingly stretched. Therefore, we are reviewing the testing regime to make adjustments based on public health risks and testing capacity. Incoming travelers are tested on arrival at their port of entry. Then they have to comply with further tests on subsequent dates. One change that we are implementing is that the day 3 test will now be moved to day 4. As such, persons who are arriving tomorrow night on the BA flight will have their follow-up test on Monday. This will apply to all travelers, whether you are visitors or residents, except for residents who need to complete their quarantine, and they will be allowed to test on day 3, which is Sunday, in order to complete their quarantine period on receipt of their negative test. We hope this will have twofold benefit of encouraging residents to obtain a pre-departure test, although it is not required, and this will make the testing schedule less taxing for our visitors. Second, we are aware that there are challenges for travelers obtaining test results within 5 days, and so we will be extending the period permitting to 7 days very shortly, and it will be reflected on our website when this goes into effect. And lastly, we are gearing up to assist the quarantine process with the quarantine bracelets that you would have recalled the Premier demonstrated one a few weeks ago. Travelers who do not have a pre-departure test, and this is largely residents, have to quarantine until they get a second test result on island. The intention is that they will be fitted with that quarantine bracelet until they obtain a negative result. In addition, persons who do not have a pre-departure test will be asked to undergo a saliva test on arrival in addition to the nasal swab in order to assist us in validating the saliva tests so that we can deploy them sooner. This applies to all residents and visitors, and this applies to residents, as all visitors, as you know, also have required to have a pre-arrival test before they come to Bermuda. Additionally, the requirement to undergo a day 7 test will change to day 8. This is safe from a public health perspective, and it will help ensure that testing sites are not swamped on certain days. Residents who refuse all testing must quarantine for 14 days, and very shortly, they too will be fitted with the quarantine bracelet. Our goal is not to add layers of red tape and complexity to the lives of incoming travelers, but to protect us all from COVID-19 outbreak. Our number one priority at all times is and must be the safety of our island and the protection of our seniors and our clinically medically vulnerable persons for whom COVID is a life-threatening risk. Independent of today's new COVID cases, Over the past few days, there have been several inquiries made by companies from across various industries with regard to staff traveling overseas and then returning to work. The main questions being, when can they safely return to work? The answer to this depends on a number of factors, and in particular, it depends on if your employee works in a high risk setting, such as one with medically vulnerable individuals, or institutionalized populations, such as a healthcare setting. So, then, if so, then those employees must consider to avoid non essential travel. Of course, this is not always practical, and in those cases where workers have family members living overseas, an ability to travel and see loved ones could have a detrimental effect on the individual's mental health. In those cases, we have to ask ourselves, what is the safest way for those individuals to return to work after travel? The gold standard is 14 days of quarantine with prescribed testing protocols and procedures to provide that extra level of security. And as a manager, you must ask yourself, could this employee work from home during those 14 days? If they must return to work with 2 consecutive negative test results, determine how they can minimize their contact with others as much as possible. Each employer must decide what this looks like for their employees. However, the Ministry of Health is currently in the process of developing further guidance on this issue, which will be distributed shortly and posted on the government website. In closing, I want to urge residents to continue to wash their hands frequently, use hand sanitizer before and after entering any store or public building, shield our medically vulnerable, avoid congregating in large groups, and continue to wear your mask and keep 6 feet apart if you are not wearing one. And yes, this means wearing masks at work if you are in close contact with others, such as during face-to-face meetings. As I've mentioned before, there are 3 preventative behaviors which Health IQ looks at to access how we are doing as a country in our response to COVID-19. 2 of these indicators are wearing your mask and physical distance. And currently, we are in the red, which means we need to do much better if we want to keep ourselves and our community safe. I think when COVID-19 first arrived in Bermuda, there were those out there who doubted the difference that seemingly and physical distancing could make to our overall picture. But now I think we can all see that, in fact, these are key to our success, not just contributing factors. On a positive note, today we passed 10,000 Health IQ users, so we have reached our goal of 10,000, and that was our target to put the indicator on our scorecard in the green. Please remember to sign up to healthiq.bm and report your status regularly. Today's 2 new cases and the quarantine breach are a reminder to us all that we cannot be complacent. How we go forward now depends on all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Wilson. And thanks again for the hard work that your team continues to put in. As you remind us often that this is a marathon and not a sprint. And it is important to note that not only the Minister of Health, but her team at the Ministry of Health and all the teams at the testing labs, especially now that we've increased the amount of tests, are working around the clock to make sure that they keep our country safe. And I know that we all owe them a debt of gratitude. It is important to note that out of the 6 imported cases that have arrived in the last 2 weeks since we've opened the airport, all of them have been returning residents. The story just shared by the Minister of Health is disturbing, as it means that our own don't care about the impact that their reckless actions may have on all of our hard work over the past 4 months. We have been successful because we have not been selfish and we've thought of the collective over our own needs. That must continue. As the Minister of Health has indicated, the matter has been reported to the Bermuda Police Service for the violations of law. No one wants to punish anyone, but the rules in place must be followed for the safety of our country and for the safety of our economy. As I've intimated, and as the Minister of Health has also said, that due to the fact that we've been faced with this is not the first challenge with returning residents not following the rules, the Cabinet will consider revisions to requirements for residents returning to the country and may introduce additional quarantine requirements for returning residents who do not possess a valid pretest. We must keep our country safe, and if we do not hear that, sadly, we may all have to feel. Traveling to the United States is something that, given the situation over there, should be not done for pleasure, but should only be done in urgent situations. And we will be revising the guidance to make sure that we minimize the amounts of imported cases which may be coming from returning residents. And as the minister said, the introduction of quarantine bracelets for persons who do not have valid pretests to ensure that we can enforce the quarantine. What I must say is that it is a responsibility of all of us Bermudians to do our job to protect our country. Visitors are coming and are following the rules. It is us that are breaking them and putting our country at risk. I will now turn the mic over to Minister Birch, who will provide the latest update on regulations and changes to restrictions, most notably the time of when the curfew will come to an end. Minister Birch.
Thank you, Premier. Good evening. I'm happy to provide a further update on additional changes since the implementation of Phase 4 on Wednesday, July 1st. I will first cover those matters that fall under the COVID regulations, followed by those that fall under the remit of the Minister of Public Works. There's been some confusion surrounding a number of issues during this journey through COVID, so I will attempt to address several of them tonight. Firstly, consideration will be given to the following changes to the current Public Health COVID-19 Emergency Powers Regulations 2020. The term exceptional circumstances is confusing, and as we move further into Phase 4, the removal of this part makes it easier to vet applications as per the guidelines being developed. These guidelines, along with the standardized application form, will lay out what is needed to be considered for an exemption, thus removing the need for this part of the clause to remain. And it will read, the Minister of National Security may, after consulting the Minister of Health, grant an exemption, a large group exemption, permitting a group of more than 50 persons to assemble. There have been a number of requests to hold functions with more than 50 persons, and the term exceptional has led to confusion from the public and an inability to adequately consider those requests by the committee. I expect we will be in a position to confirm this change, publish the guidelines, and launch the online application by next Tuesday, which will provide greater clarity to the general public. With regard to the current curfew, as indicated last week that it would be reviewed weekly, the curfew will be lifted effective Monday, July 20th, with the proviso that all liquor licensed establishments will close at midnight. This aspect of the new regulations will be reviewed weekly as well. Clarification on the wearing of masks. Masks must be worn indoors. Masks must be worn outdoors if physical distancing cannot be maintained. That's the standard line. Clearly, there is a need to apply some common sense. If one is driving in a car alone or with members of their household, riding a bike or walking alone, it is not necessary to wear a mask. Simply put, if you are in close proximity to anyone outside your family, then a mask is required. Many stores and businesses, like government buildings, now require a mask as mandatory to enter their facility. With regard to activities over cup match, overnight camping in parks and on islands will be allowed following the removal of curfew as well as over the cup match weekend. All of the campsites are currently being inspected over the next few days, and applications for camping permits will be accepted from Monday, the 20th of July. Specifically during cup match, campers and picnickers will be allowed to erect camping and picnicking equipment and property on Tuesday, the 28th of July. However, camping is only permitted from Wednesday, the 29th of July until Monday, the 3rd of August, as per the Public Health COVID Emergency Powers Amendment regulations. Gates will be open on Tuesday, the 28th of July, so that patrons will have the opportunity to get their equipment and property into the parks and beaches until 9:30 p.m. on Wednesday, the 29th of July, after which time park ranger staff on duty will be locking the gates. All equipment and property must be removed by Tuesday, the 4th of August 2020, or it will be deemed abandoned and disposed of. Maintenance staff will be collecting trash and cleaning bathrooms during the cut match holiday and weekend. Park ranger staff will patrol the parks and beaches, enforcing the park regulations and addressing any other incidents in conjunction with the Bermuda Police Service and the Royal Bermuda Regiment. Staff will be assigned to control traffic flow and parking at the following locations: Horseshoe Bay, Warwick Long Bay West, Elba Beach Tri-Road 4B, Clearwater Beach Park, and Coopers Island Park and Nature Reserve. Horseshoe Bay, due to the popularity on Emancipation Day, Thursday, the 30th of July, 2020, will be managed as follows. Department of Park staff, in conjunction with officers of the Bermuda Police Service, Royal Bermuda Regiment, and St. John's Ambulance, will be on duty. Traffic flow and parking will be controlled, and once the parking lot is full, access will be for dropping off only until spaces open up. There may be times when the parking lot is closed to allow traffic in order to clear any congestion. Patrons are advised that the closure of Horseshoe Bay will be at 9 p.m. when patrons must start clearing the beach in order for the cleaning to begin for the use of Mary Prince Day, Friday, the 31st of July, 2020. Park and beach users are reminded not to park on double yellow lines or block the gates, as they must remain clear at all times for access by Department of Parks maintenance and patrol vehicles, as well as emergency vehicles. For safety, the following will not be permitted: no bonfires, especially within Coopers Island Nature Reserve; no excessively loud music playing; no dogs on beaches; no horses on beaches; no vehicles inside the parks after the gates are closed. Clean up your trash. Leave the areas as you find them, is my request. Vehicular traffic to Coney Island Park is restricted due to the structural integrity of the Bailey Bridge leading from the mainland, and patrons must walk. The cooperation of the patrons using the parks and beaches over the holiday period is very much appreciated. All these measures are being relaxed because of our good behavior and of following the rules. We are still in a pandemic, but we also recognize that we must gradually relax the rules. It is vitally important that in considering our actions going forward, that we all must be cognizant and careful to make decisions that do not put our families and fellow citizens at risk regarding the coronavirus. Make no mistake that if we act badly, then there will be no hesitation in recommending to the Cabinet that we return to an earlier phase to protect our country. No one wishes for that to happen, especially the Cabinet Committee members. I expect we will be as responsible as we have been, which has gotten us to our current state of general compliance. Thank you, Premier.
Thank you, Minister of Public Works, and thank the work that your committee has done over the past month or a little bit more to make sure that we are able to reopen our economy in a safe and responsible fashion. The ending of the curfew represents not just a major landmark in the reopening of our economy, but it will also create more opportunities for employment. Pre-COVID-19, few Bermudians under 50 had ever experienced a curfew, and we had long taken for granted the freedom to move about the country when we want and how we want. This is something that many of us will welcome, but it must not be taken as a license to lose our minds. Simply put, as I've said it before, please don't tear it. We have come too far to go back now. Earlier today, I had the pleasure to announce 2 new appointments to the Cabinet. I would like to thank Minister Renee Ming for accepting the role as Minister of National Security, and thank Minister Neville Tyrrell for taking on the role of Minister of Transport. Over the years, they have demonstrated the commitment, dedication, and wisdom that will hold them in good stead as they take over two key ministries. I'd like to again thank the former ministers, Wayne Keynes and Zane De Silva, for the excellent place which they left their former ministries, enabling their successors to hit the ground running. Tomorrow, the House of Assembly will meet, and we will be debating 6 bills: amendments to the Parliamentary Elections Act, Riddles Bay Warwick Parish Special Development Order, amendments to the National Pension Scheme Act, the Ministers and Members of the Legislature Pensions Act, the Public Service Superannuation Amendment Act, in addition to the Registrar of Companies Supervision and Regulation Act 2020. Tomorrow, we will also be tabling as a government 5 bills: the Trust Special Provisions Act, Gaming Transfer of Functions Bill, Government Loans Amendment Act, amendments to the Tourism Investment Act, and the Tourism Investment St. George's Club Order. Over the next 2 weeks, over 11 bills will be debated and passed into law with the support of members of Parliament. In addition, there will be other motions as well. This extensive work of the government team in continuing to deliver and doing what is necessary to rebuild our economy for the people of challenges posed by COVID-19. Our government has remained active outside of the management of the pandemic, and we remain focused on the job at hand. We work tirelessly to keep Bermudians safe, and we will work equally as hard to ensure a strong economic recovery. The government has received numerous emails, letters, and social media posts from grateful residents and businesses extending their thanks and pledging support. And one key goal our government has had through this pandemic has been to support local and international business to ensure that our companies can continue to conduct their operations while fully adhering to the safety protocols to meet the COVID-19 regulations. We were recently able to demonstrate our ability to drive a business-friendly environment despite the restrictions posed by the pandemic. Key leaders of Athene, one of Bermuda's largest long-term reinsurance companies, needed to travel to Bermuda to conduct certain meetings. Together, the Bermuda Business Development Agency, the Bermuda Airport Authority, and the LF Wade International Airport worked to enable Athene to come to Bermuda and meet on the island in June, while ensuring full compliance with COVID-19 regulations. The Airport Authority and Cedar Aviation implemented strict measures and protocols to ensure the meeting could take place safely and successfully. Before the LF Wade International opened to regularly scheduled commercial traffic, the Bermuda government adapted swiftly and pragmatically to address the individual requirements of companies that required on-island meetings. Athene sends a statement of thanks from its president, which stated that we are grateful for the support we received from the Bermuda government, the BDA, and local agencies. Bermuda's swift action allowed us to conduct local business while prioritizing the health and safety of all those involved and ensuring full compliance with all of Bermuda's laws and regulation. Thank you to Bermuda's continued exemplary business-friendly approach, even during these unprecedented times. The Bermuda government is grateful for the support and commitment of our local and international business partners who continue to work with us during this period of global economic challenge. I would also, as I close, like to thank again everyone in Bermuda for your words of encouragement, your emails of support, and your prayers for our health and success and the well-being of our families. It remains an honor and a privilege to serve our country during this time, and we thank you for all that you have done over the past few months to make our burdens lighter and to continue to make this work rewarding. I'm now happy to take questions from members of the media that are here assembled today.
Sarah Lagan from the Royal Gazette. Good evening. Regarding the new cabinet appointments today, Premier, you mentioned that the announcement would be made on Wednesday, so there's a 24-hour delay. on the announcement. With the swearing in of Neville Tyrrell today, the question is, was he not your first choice? Because he actually let slip that he only found out last night of his appointment.
Well, just so you're clear, not only he found out last night, but also Minister Ming found out last night. There was no delay, and there were two members of the caucus who were offered positions, and both of those members of the caucus accepted those positions. I wanted to make the appointments on Wednesday. I wasn't going to make them before cabinet. I wanted to make the appointments on Wednesday, but as I had indicated to persons when I was here last week, I was actually on vacation over the weekend. And Thursday night, after I left this press conference, I turned my phone off, and I did not turn my phone back on until Monday morning at 9 a.m. So I'm very thankful to the Deputy Premier who stood in my stead and allowed my family and I to have some time off to rest and to recharge some of my batteries. We had a very long cabinet meeting on Tuesday where we considered a number of items. It was actually our longest cabinet meeting since I have been inside of this role, where we considered a number of items in support of our economic recovery, which is the most important task for the government to focus on at this time. And given the timing at that time, I had informed the members of my caucus on Monday nights and the members of my central committee that I will not be making the appointments on Wednesday, and I'll be making them on Thursday, because I did not want to go ahead and try to rush the decision. And I like to make sure I take the time to talk to persons. And it would be really difficult to have done that on Tuesday with a very long cabinet meeting and rushing with the preparation, which is necessary for cabinet. So there was no one who did not accept. There were two offers made, two offers that were accepted. But the nature of appointments is that you find out the day before.
Okay, thank you. With regards to the large group exemptions, has there been an uptick in applications in recent days? Certainly since perhaps the Blue event came to light. Has there been an increase in applications at all?
I can't speak to an uptick in applications, and I'm unsure if the ministers will know.
No, there hasn't been an uptick. There was an uptick before Blue. And it's stabilized somewhat now, but there are about 8 applications that are currently pending.
Yeah. Okay. Can you talk about on what grounds the approval was given for the Blue event by the National Security?
I cannot speak on that matter right now, but what I do know is that there are a number of parliamentary questions that are on the order paper tomorrow regarding the Blue event, and that is the reason why the Minister of National Security is at her ministry preparing to answer those questions. So I'm certain that those questions and answers will be addressed in the House of Assembly tomorrow.
Okay. We had a question about those aged between 10 and 17. I think you might have answered this, being subject to saliva testing. Those saliva tests are ready now?
The age between 10 and 17, those individuals will be subjected to the nasopharyngeal test. The saliva tests have to be validated. So as I indicated in the statement, what we are doing is all persons that do not have a pre-departure test that arrive in Bermuda will also take the nasal test as well as the saliva test so that we can get the requisite numbers to validate the saliva test.
Okay, we'd had a comment from somebody who had said that her father had applied for unemployment benefit from the government, and he'd actually managed to get back to work and had informed the government that he was back to work, but then continued to get paid. And the question was asked, how often is this happening? Are you aware of it? And how often, people getting paid when they're not supposed to be getting paid?
Mm-hmm. Happy to answer the question. It was something of which we were made aware of on Monday. It's a matter that we discussed on Tuesday, Cabinet, and had a follow-up discussion with the Minister of Finance yesterday morning after the Minister of Finance, Minister of Labor, and myself met with the ABR board. He had received the response on this specific issue. The one thing I can say is that it is not widespread, and so that is something that is that he made sure that matter was looked into. It is not widespread, but we will, without question, in standing up a system this quickly. Just as there were issues with payments, there are some issues with the stopping of payments as well. The Minister of Finance is confident that those matters will be addressed. I'm thankful for the member of the public who is being honest, and that is what we expect inside of this time. But I know that they are reviewing those processes to find out what went wrong. But what I will say is that the Minister of Finance was very clear that just as there were individual instances of people who were not being paid, but the vast majority of people who were being paid. In this particular case, an instance, the vast majority of people who have reported that they're back to work are not being paid. He's investigating the circumstances specifically on this, but he is confident that the issues are not widespread.
Okay. And in terms of, if it's okay to ask about the municipalities, Colonel Birch?
Sure.
How would a government takeover, for want of a better word, of the municipalities improve St. George's? You were quoted recently saying, it's perceived as a sleepy old town. How would government being in charge improve that situation?
Well, we have money
You have money?
to support them. I can tell you that in the case of the Corporation of St. George, they actually welcome the actions that we're taking. Certainly, one of the ways in which it will help the town almost immediately is the improvements to the infrastructure in relation to water and wastewater. But it's vitally important that St. George's understand that they are getting almost 2 new hotels in the next 9 months. And we cannot allow what is happening in St. George at the moment to continue so that visitors to the town have nothing to do. And so we are determined to work with the corporation and the people of St. George to make sure that they have a vibrant town that is going to welcome guests in 2021. And I think that that's going to be the easy part of it. Hamilton's going to be a little bit more difficult, but I don't anticipate any major issues in St. George at all. I've already met with both the 2 MPs for the district. I've met with the corporation. I met with, sorry, not the corporation, but the mayor and the town manager, and they've been up to the ministry, and we're providing them with some immediate support in terms of some infrastructure work that needs to be done in the town cut. I'm going to meet with the council at some stage. It's probably scheduled, I just don't know when. And I intend having a town hall in St. George's very soon, because it's important that we get buy-in from the people of St. George, that we're there to help them as opposed to having them do things that they don't wish to do.
Good evening. My name is Mackenzie Cole Tuckett on behalf of Media Maya. My first couple of questions are for you, Mr. Premier. When can students, parents, and teachers expect to be informed about the decisions on the reopening of the physical school environment?
Thank you very much for your question. It was a matter that was discussed in cabinet on Tuesday. The Minister of Education did present the plan that was reviewed by members of the cabinet, and I believe that he's planning on making a ministerial statement on that matter. I'm not sure if it is tomorrow in the House of Assembly or next week Friday in the House of Assembly, but it will be one or the other. I don't remember off the top of my head. It might be next week Friday in the House of Assembly.
Okay, thank you. My second question. According to new regulations released by U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, international students attending U.S. colleges that will operate entirely online this fall semester cannot remain in the country. Can you tell us how this will impact Bermudian students currently studying in the U.S.?
Thank you very much for your question, Mackenzie. I appreciate it. The fact is that the United States is a very fluid situation. And so while we were planning for what we were going to do in situations like that, and also planning on how we could possibly attract students to the country to go ahead and study here and do their classes remotely, I think the U.S. actually reversed that rule and backed down on that rule yesterday. So it is no longer that threat. So persons who are in classes remotely will be able to travel. The IC did say that they are no longer going to have that enforcement action to deport. But the fact is that, that might change again. So currently, as it was 1 week, it was one thing. Another week, it was here. So that threat is now gone. However, if I'm going to be completely honest, if there were classes that were being offered online, and given the situation and circumstance of the United States, where they are seemingly having a challenge managing the coronavirus pandemic, I would encourage any and all Bermudian students, if you do not have to travel to the United States, stay here. This disease does not affect young people, but young people have died from the coronavirus. And so if you don't have to go to a place which is not managing the pandemic well, do not do it.
Mhm. My next question, with the island's current unemployment and underemployment rates, along with the number of people who have had pay cuts as a result of the pandemic, there is a strong likelihood that there will be students who will not be able to return to university this fall due to financial constraints. Does the government have any plans to extend the summer employment program beyond the usual 10 weeks in an effort to assist students who find themselves in these unfortunate circumstances?
While I'm not going to say that the government has a plan to extend the summer employment program specifically on a broad level, what I can say is that there are many opportunities for summer students to engage in the work in protecting the country, whether it's work inside of the COVID helpline, whether it's work with the quarantine monitoring, the quarantine bracelets, or other things in which we'll certainly put into place. Regarding persons not being able to return to school, it would be known that this government has increased the scholarship budget, has increased the training budget, and wants to make sure that we can support those students in those situations. This was a conversation that the cabinet had on Tuesday, as one of the things we want to make sure that we're doing is supporting our young people and supporting persons who are displaced. Economic recovery is at the key and the focus of all of the things of which we're working on. So on the issues of which you're speaking about, specifically when it comes to young people, we will make sure that those persons are supported. It is not going to be on a broad-based level of, we're going to extend the summer employment program without restriction, but we are going to make sure that we can focus on those persons who need that help and that assistance.
Thank you. Government had scheduled a representative from Canada to come and take biometrics for university students to apply for their visas. Because of COVID-19, they could not arrive on the island. When can students applying to universities in Canada expect for a rescheduling of the representative to come to Bermuda, as many applications are soon due and biometrics are necessary?
That's an excellent question. If any ministers next week can answer. No? No? All right. Well, I will do my best. We do have flights from Canada, so I'm assuming that that person will be able to come. I know this was something that was negotiated, and it's something that we'll continue. What I will ask, Mackenzie, if you can go ahead and submit that question in writing to the ministry, and we'll make sure that we can get to you an answer for that specific question. We know that it was an arrangement that we worked on with Canada. We were pleased to be able to offer that service here, and I'm sure we'll be able to figure out a way to make sure it gets restarted. I know that the Canada flights are once a week now, but when in August, they're going to increase in frequency as well.
Okay, thank you. And my final question is for you, the Minister of Health. Some persons have been wearing plastic face shields as their only form of protective gear. Should these persons also be wearing a face mask when entering an establishment?
The point with respect to the wearing of the face mask is to obviously protect yourself as well as to protect others. We are encouraging persons to use the reusable mask, the cloth mask, and not things like the N95, because those things are quite specific and they should be reserved for persons that are working within the medical field or on the front line. Some persons, as you said, are wearing a face shield. There is no particular requirement as to whether it should be a face shield as opposed to something that's a cloth shield. The main thing is to ensure that you are protecting yourself and protecting others by keeping your nose and your mouth covered whilst you're interacting with persons that are closer to 6 feet.
Thank you.
Good evening. Don Burgess, Bermuda Broadcasting. At the pop-up testing place at Chile Bay last Saturday, tourists praised the ease of entry and the testing at the airport. However, they wish they could pre-book their appointments for their now 4, 8-day, and 14-day tests, as that would make it faster for them to enjoy their vacation rather than spending time standing in line. Is there a reason why tourists can't make testing appointments?
The important point with respect to that is that not only are we continuously to test aggressively, and we are trying to make it a more streamlined process for our travelers as well as our locals alike. The TA system, the travel authorization system, was put up very, very quickly when we announced that we were going to open the borders. We moved quickly to put that system in place, and we are working to ensure that there is the availability of making testing online bookings in advance. So we are looking into that.
Thank you very much. It's been 2 weeks since the first scheduled commercial flight arrived. What have been the compliance rate with arrivals getting their 3, 7, and 14-day tests thus far? And how is the government tracking and compliance software performing?
With today's exception, we've seen really, really good compliance. People have been generally complying to the requirements to quarantine as well as to present themselves on the testing sites on the various days. In fact, our public health team are in constant contact with those persons to remind them in advance when their day 3, day 7, day 14 test is approaching for them to get their test. We've not seen any positive tests with respect to the subsequent test. All of our positives have been identified at the airport at the arrival test. And also with respect to the software, it is going well. We've had a couple of glitches, but you can appreciate that this software is in charge of effectively a very large project with respect to all the persons and all the testing that we're doing. So we are still working with our technical team and actually have a dedicated team that's now tied specifically to answering questions that people may have with respect to filling out the TAs and booking their appointments and the like.
Thank you. Mr. Premier, the Bermuda government seems to have done a U-turn on the beneficial ownership register in order to comply with the UK's demands. Can you explain why we have made this decision, and more broadly beyond the hospitality industry, what is government doing right now to attract business to Bermuda?
You did a very good job of trying to put two questions into one on that one, Don Burgess. Two completely unrelated subjects. But let me answer the first question. I completely reject the premise which you say about making a U-turn in return to demands of the United Kingdom government. So let me be clear. The position of the government of Bermuda has not changed. We do not in any way, shape, or form accept the United Kingdom's right to govern by an order in council the internal affairs of an overseas territory or colony such as Bermuda is. And we have a special and distinct and unique constitution, which is not the same as other overseas territories. And the position has been very clear that we will. The position of the government of Bermuda has always been that we will adopt a public register of beneficial ownership based on emerging global standards. It is key to note that we do not perceive a threat from the United Kingdom because we do not in any way, shape, or form recognize the United Kingdom's right to have any type of influence on the government of Bermuda in this regard. We recognize the threat, in our view, is the European Union. We have an insurance industry in Bermuda that relies on the European Union Solvency II equivalents that we have, which is something that not a lot of countries have, but we do here. The European Union has the 5th Anti-Money Laundering Directive, which calls for public registers of company beneficial ownership. What we have stated in similar terms to the Crown dependencies is that we will wait for the implementation review from the European Union on this particular, on public registers of beneficial ownership. And at that time, we will see where the global standard is, and we will move to adopt that global standard and lay out a timeline. This is not, the statement is not in response to the United Kingdom, because we do not necessarily perceive there to be a threat, because we do not acknowledge the United Kingdom's view that they can legislate for Bermuda from Westminster. As an international company jurisdiction, we have to make sure that we are keeping up with the global trends. We have said very clearly that we'll do it when it is a global standard. The fact is that the largest economic bloc in the world is the European Union. And if we want to maintain our insurance industry, and if we've made commitments to live by the EU's 5th Anti-Money Laundering Directive, we will make sure that we have to comply. But what we will not do is we will not do it prematurely, and we will not do it on anyone else's timeline except for the timeline and establish that we do in our parliament ourselves. So I reject completely the premise of your question about bowing to United Kingdom pressure. This is not about the United Kingdom.
Okay, thank you. On the government's COVID-19 website, the indicator for the amount of tests Bermuda has in reserve has gone into the red zone, indicating we have less than a 3-month supply of tests available. How many tests do we have available, including the swabs, reagents, and materials needed to make the PCR test work? And when might Bermuda be getting more?
As I've said previously, Don, there are testing supplies that are a worldwide shortage, and we are doing our best to procure them from all types of jurisdictions. We have approximately 1 month supply remaining of the nasal swabs currently on island, and we've ordered more that should bring up our testing capacity to the end of September. We have 11,000 saliva swabs. Saliva tests, excuse me, that as I indicated previously, we are actually going to start the validation of that. And we were challenged somewhat with respect to the validation because we only just recently started having positive tests. So we have to validate with positives. But as I indicated in my statement, we will start doing the PCR test as well as the saliva test on all incoming travelers who do not have a pre-departure test, which most, by and large, will be residents, Bermuda residents.
Okay, thank you. Bermuda restarted antibody testing this week. When might we start to see results from these tests? And are they available at all testing locations or only at Southside?
Right now, as you're correct, we did start the antibody testing. We resumed that on the 5th of July at Southside. It is more convenient logistically to do it at Southside, but we are looking to see whether or not that can be expanded into other locations. The issue as it relates to consent, so persons do have to sign a consent form, so it's a lot easier if they're sitting in their car and then they're getting that. So from a logistics point of view, that's more convenient. It's also, they are by appointment, again, because they have to sign the consent form, and the negative antibody result tests are sent directly to the patient. And if it's positive, they receive between 24 and 48 hours, and it's sent directly to the physician.
You mentioned earlier this evening with regard to pushing the pre-test back to 7 days. Quest Diagnostics, which is doing 125,000 tests a day in the United States, or roughly 16% of all tests that are done in the U.S., announced this week that it's so backlogged that people can't expect a test result for at least 7 days. Other U.S. Testing labs are reporting similar situations, and other areas in the U.S. are not doing tests unless a person is showing symptoms because of the backlog. Will the government be considering waiving the 7-day pre-test at some point if the backlog continues to get worse in the United States?
It boils down to one simple fact. The pre-departure test is a requirement for those persons that are traveling to Bermuda. The pre-departure test is the best mechanism that we have to detect if a person has COVID before they get on the plane. So we will certainly not be reconsidering that position. We amended the regs so that we can make it go back to 7 days because we heard from our travel partners that the 5 days out was a little bit problematic. So we have changed that. Public Health have consulted, and the scientific committee that the Premier chairs, we had a meeting this afternoon, and they confirmed that the 7 days would not be problematic. And so we've already sent drafting instructions to chambers for them to amend the order.
All right, thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Trevor Lindsay, TNN News. Minister of Health, with the numbers of COVID numbers rising in the United States, do you expect Bermuda's numbers to rise? Do you anticipate a second wave of the coronavirus to hit Bermuda in the fall? And what are the preparations for Bermuda?
Given the prevalence of and the increases, as you rightly pointed out, with respect to coronavirus in America, recognizing that that is one of our key travel destinations, we are anticipating that we will see more positive cases coming to Bermuda, coming to our shores. As the Premier indicated, of the 6 that have just come that we've noticed since we opened up our borders, they were residents, but it is anticipated and expected that we will see persons that are arriving in Bermuda that are travelers and not residents that are positive. Insofar as preparation, the preparation that we have implemented is with respect to testing. You've heard me speak previously about the importance of identifying those persons that have COVID, and we do that through the testing and isolating, and that will be through the isolation and under the quarantine COVID-19 order, they are required to isolate if they are if they are found positive. So we will continue to test so that we can identify. And if we do identify persons that are positive, then they will be required under the law to isolate.
Thank you. Premier, has the committee formed by the finance minister come forward with any recommendations that would benefit those at the bottom of the economic ladder?
I'm not fully familiar with the recommendations of which the committee has had, but what I would say on a broad level, whether it's the Economic Advisory Council
Mhm.
or whether it is the work of the cabinet as a whole, we are focused on the economic recovery. And so what I would say is this: number one, a stronger economy benefits everyone. And we have a record that we have had insofar as investment, insofar as making sure that persons at the lowest scale pay the lowest payroll taxes, which they had in history, and we're going to continue that record of which we have. So our economic policies will continue to be broad-based. But here's one thing that I will say, and it's very clear. We are fortunate in Bermuda to have an international business sector that other countries do not have. And during this pandemic, not a single member of the Association of Bermuda Insurers and Reinsurers let anyone go, even if they couldn't go to the office, whether they be receptionists or otherwise. Those persons were paid, their incomes were secured, and they took care of those persons like a family. We need to make sure that we, as a country, recognize that if our economy as a whole is successful, Bermuda is successful. That's not anything about trickle down. That is just the reality of which we face here. And so when we talk about persons at the lower end of the economic spectrum, the middle end of the economic spectrum, or the higher end of the economic spectrum, the thing that we cannot start doing is trying to pit ourselves against each other. We want the entire economy to survive, the entire economy to get stronger, and all of the policies that are in place from this government, some of which will be announced in the House of Assembly tomorrow, are for that purpose, to make sure that we have a stronger economy so that more persons can work in this country and more persons can provide for their families.
Thank you. Another question for you, Premier. Today you've chosen Renee Ming as your National Security Minister. Ms. Ming stated in the House of Assembly, in your cabinet, you had a very few women in your cabinet. Was that part of your choice of selecting Ms. Ming?
I wouldn't say that. I would say that I take a look at the entire caucus and the backbench and look at the persons who I think have done the work and are deserving of the opportunity. And we have said it many times in many instances that the best way to show that you are ready for the role as cabinet is by doing your work as a constituency MP. And MP Neville Tyrrell and MP Renee Ming have been exemplary inside of their work inside of the community. They have done work in serving and leading a number of government boards, and that work has been and has gone well. So from that perspective, she has earned her chance, and I look forward to her service. You have to remember, MP Renee Ming served as the Senate leader as well. So and an all-women Senate team, which is appointed by myself. So the Progressive Labor Party has a
I might say. Minister Birch, this one is for you. Are you aware of a boat cruise that returned to Boss Bay Park at 1:45 on July the 4th, I'm sorry, outside of curfew hours?
what I
July 4th.
Let us police ourselves. Let us remember these rules are here to protect us. Let us remember the only way that as a country we can move forward is if we all do our part. I look forward to seeing you again next week, Thursday, and I hope that everyone has a safe and blessed holiday weekend. Thank you, everyone, and good night, Bermuda.